The laptop screen cast a harsh glow across my face as I stared at the email thread, my fingers hovering motionless over the keyboard. 3 hours had passed since I'd accidentally stumbled into Ryan's account, left open on our shared computer, and I still couldn't process what I was reading. I'm Iris, and until tonight, I thought I understood my marriage. Have you managed to keep her focused where we discussed? Evelyn's message read. Remember, darling, a wife who feels too independent becomes difficult to guide. Our plan needs patience. My husband's response made my stomach turn. Don't worry, Mother. Iris still thinks everything's her idea. The transfer will happen soon enough. The words blurred as tears threatened to spill. I blinked them back, refusing to cry. The timestamp showed this exchange happened just yesterday, while Ryan and I were planning our future together over dinner. While he smiled and nodded at my career goals, he was plotting with his mother to, what exactly? Control me? Steal from me? My phone buzzed. Ryan's face lit up the screen. Hey, beautiful? Running late at the office? Don't wait up. I cleared my throat. No problem. Everything okay? Just finishing up some reports. Miss you. The casual lie in his voice made my skin crawl. I'd seen his calendar. He had dinner scheduled with Evelyn tonight, another secret meeting to discuss their plan. Miss you too, I managed, the words tasting like ash. After hanging up, I scrolled through months of correspondence between them. Each message revealed new layers of manipulation. They discussed everything from undermining my confidence at work to slowly isolating me from my friends. Even my recent promotion had been a source of concern for them. She's getting too ambitious, Evelyn had written. Remember what happened with your father when he started believing he could make decisions without me. The front door clicked open downstairs. I quickly closed the laptop and moved to our bedroom, mind racing. Ryan's footsteps on the stairs were steady, unhurried, the pace of a man who believed his secrets were safe. You're still up? He appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. The familiar gesture seemed sinister now, like watching an actor perform a well-rehearsed role. Couldn't sleep. I forced a smile. How was work? Brutal. These quarterly reports are killing me. He sat on the bed, reaching for my hand. You okay? You look tense. I let him take it, studying his face. The concern in his eyes seemed genuine, and that was perhaps the most terrifying part. He'd gotten so good at this. Actually, I wanted to talk about something. I kept my voice steady. I've been thinking about our joint account. His fingers twitched almost imperceptibly against mine. What about it? I'm considering separating our finances, for tax purposes. The flash of panic in his eyes confirmed everything. He recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. Why would you want to do that? His tone was carefully neutral. We've always handled everything together, as partners. Partners. The word hung between us like a bad joke. Just a thought, I said, pulling my hand away. We can discuss it tomorrow. You must be tired after dinner with your mother. He froze for a split second. What? Oh, sorry, I meant after your late meeting. My mistake. The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, fear, calculation, and finally, something close to anger. Have you been checking my calendar? His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Does it matter? I met his gaze steadily. We're partners, aren't we? He stood up abruptly. I need a shower. As the bathroom door closed behind him, I heard him pulling out his phone, no doubt calling Evelyn, reporting this unexpected development in their careful plans. I lay back on the bed, mind already racing ahead. They thought they were so clever, playing their long game, but they'd forgotten something crucial. I wasn't the same naive woman they'd started manipulating 3 years ago, and now that I knew the truth, I had plans of my own. 3 days after discovering the emails, I came home to find Evelyn's Mercedes parked in our driveway. Moving boxes were stacked by the front door, and the sound of her voice drifted from inside our house, my house, like poison in the air. Really, darling, the guest room is perfect. I can keep an eye on everything from there. I stood frozen on the doorstep, my work bag suddenly heavy on my shoulder. Ryan appeared in the hallway, carrying another box. "Surprise?" he beamed, as if he'd just arranged the most thoughtful gift. "Mom's pipes burst at her place. She'll be staying with us for a while." The calculated timing was impressive. Of course she'd show up now, just when I was starting to piece together their scheme. "How long is a while?" I managed to ask. "Oh, don't worry about that, dear." Evelyn emerged from the guest room, her perfectly manicured hands clasped together. "The contractor said it could be weeks, maybe months, but I'll make myself useful. I know how overwhelmed you've been lately." My fingers tightened around my bag strap. "I'm not overwhelmed." Now. She patted my arm as she passed, her touch light but somehow invasive. "Ryan tells me you've been acting rather stressed, checking his calendar, asking about finances. That's not like you at all." The look she gave me was pure concern, but her eyes were sharp as razors. Ryan shifted uncomfortably between us. "I thought having Mom here might help," he said. "You know, take some pressure off." "Pressure," I repeated. The word tasted bitter. "Right." That night, I lay awake listening to their muffled voices from downstairs. The guest room shared a wall with our bedroom, and I could hear Evelyn unpacking, each drawer closing like a countdown to something inevitable. My phone lit up with a text from Ryan. "Coming to bed soon. Love you." He was 20 feet away in our own house, texting instead of speaking. The distance wasn't physical anymore. The next morning, I found Evelyn reorganizing my kitchen cabinets. "The flow was all wrong," she explained, not looking up. "Ryan always said you struggled with organization. But don't worry, I'll fix everything." I opened my mouth to object, but she was already continuing. "Oh, and I took the liberty of canceling your dinner plans with Sarah tonight. Ryan mentioned you've been working so hard lately. You need rest, not social obligations." My coffee cup hit the counter harder than intended. "You did what?" "It's for the best, dear. Sarah's influence hasn't been beneficial lately, all that talk about independent women and career advancement." She smiled, sugar sweet. "Sometimes friends can plant dangerous ideas." The pieces clicked together. Sarah had been encouraging me to apply for a director position, a promotion that would put me ahead of Ryan in salary. "I can manage my own social calendar," I said, keeping my voice level. "Of course you can, dear." She reached up to pat my cheek. "But as Ryan's mother, it's my duty to protect this marriage. We wouldn't want you making any impulsive decisions." The threat was clear beneath her words. I stepped back, my mind racing. They were moving faster than I'd anticipated, already working to isolate me. That evening, Ryan came home early for the first time in months. He found me in our home office, supposedly working late. "Mom made dinner," he said, hovering in the doorway. "Your favorite." I didn't look up from my laptop. "Not hungry?" He sighed. "Iris, I know this is an adjustment, but Mom means well. She just wants to help." "Help with what, exactly?" The question hung between us. I finally looked at him, really looked at him. The man I married was still there somewhere, buried beneath layers of his mother's manipulation. But I couldn't reach him anymore. "Come down to dinner," he said softly. "Please? For me?" I closed my laptop. "Of course. Wouldn't want to disappoint anyone." As I followed him downstairs, I could feel Evelyn's satisfaction radiating through the house. She thought she was tightening her grip, but she'd made a crucial mistake. In trying to control every aspect of my life, she'd given me a front-row seat to their operation, and I intended to take careful notes. The bank statement trembled in my hands as I stared at the transaction history. Over the past 6 months, nearly $40,000 had been siphoned from our joint savings account through a series of small transfers. Each one labeled as household expenses or maintenance costs, all authorized by Ryan. I'd been tracking the money trail for weeks, watching our account balance dwindle while Evelyn paraded around in new designer outfits, and Ryan made excuses about inflation and rising costs. But seeing the full scope of their deception made my chest tight with rage. A knock at my office door startled me. "Come in," I called, quickly minimizing the browser window. "Mrs. Mitchell?" My assistant poked her head in. There's a David Carter here to see you. Says it's personal? The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Evelyn's ex-husband. What could he possibly want? Send him in. David Carter looked nothing like I'd imagined from Evelyn's bitter descriptions of her failure of an ex. He was tall, distinguished, with kind eyes that carried a familiar wariness I recognized from my own mirror. Iris, he said, closing the door behind him. I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but when I heard Evelyn moved in with you and Ryan... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Let's just say I couldn't stay silent anymore. How did you know where to find me? My wife Sophia works in marketing too. Different firm, but same circles. He sat down, his expression grave. We've been watching Evelyn's patterns repeat themselves. The same tactics she used to destroy our marriage, she's using on you. My throat tightened. The money. He nodded. Started small with us too. Then suddenly, I was drowning in debt I couldn't explain. By the time I figured it out, he pulled out his phone, scrolling through some documents. Well, let's just say you're catching on faster than I did. The office door burst open. Ryan stood there, his face flushed with anger. What the hell is this? Ryan, I started, but he cut me off. Mother warned me you might try something like this. His voice shook. Meeting with her ex-husband, behind my back? David stood slowly. Your mother warned you because she knew I'd tell the truth about her. About what she did to our family. Get out. Ryan's hands were clenched into fists. You have no right to be here. Actually, I said, standing up, I invited him. The lie came easily. Because I needed answers about the $40,000 you and your mother stole from our savings. The color drained from Ryan's face. That's not... I can explain. Mrs. Bennett? My assistant appeared behind Ryan looking concerned. Security is on their way up. That won't be necessary, David said calmly. I'm leaving. But Iris, my wife, and I would love to have you over for dinner sometime, when you're ready to hear the whole story. He handed me a business card and walked out, leaving Ryan and me in a silence thick with unspoken accusations. You had no right, Ryan finally said, his voice low and dangerous. That money was for our future. Our future, I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. Or your mother's shopping addiction. She needed help. After everything she's done for us. For you, I corrected. Everything she's done for you. And now you're letting her destroy our marriage, just like she destroyed hers. His face hardened. You don't understand anything about my mother. No, I said quietly. But I'm starting to understand everything about you. That night I sat in my car outside David and Sophia's house, their business card crumpled in my hand. Through their window I could see them moving around their kitchen, cooking together, laughing. They looked peaceful, happy. My phone buzzed with another text from Ryan. Where are you? Mom's worried. Of course she was. Her carefully constructed web was starting to unravel, and she could feel her grip loosening. I took a deep breath and got out of the car. It was time to learn exactly what I was up against, and more importantly, how to fight back. As I walked toward their front door, I felt something shift inside me. The last traces of doubt and guilt melting away, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. They wanted to play games with my life? Fine. But they were about to learn I was done playing by their rules. Sophia's kitchen smelled like fresh coffee and honesty, a combination I hadn't experienced in weeks. She placed a manila folder on the table between us, her expression gentle but firm. Before you open this, she said, you need to understand something. What happened to David wasn't just about money. It was about control. My hands hovered over the folder. Inside were copies of bank statements, court documents, and photographs spanning David and Evelyn's marriage. Each page told a story of calculated destruction, assets drained, relationships poisoned, reality twisted until truth became whatever Evelyn declared it to be. She convinced him he was losing his mind, Sophia continued, made him doubt every decision, every memory. By the end, he couldn't even trust himself to manage his own bank account. The parallels made my stomach lurch. I thought about the mistakes I'd been making lately, Appointments I supposedly forgot, conversations I supposedly misremembered. How Ryan would exchange knowing looks with his mother, their concern masking something darker. My phone buzzed. Another message from Ryan. Meeting got canceled, coming home early. We need to talk. They're accelerating their timeline, I said, showing Sophia the text. Ever since David showed up at my office. They're scared. She leaned forward. You're not following their script anymore. I flipped through more documents, stopping at a familiar name, Carter Engineering Solutions. This was David's company? Built it from nothing. Evelyn convinced him to add her name to the incorporation documents. For tax purposes, she said. 6 months later, she'd transferred controlling interest to herself and pushed him out of his own business. My hands started shaking. Last week, Ryan had suggested I add him as a partner to my freelance consulting business, for tax purposes. I have to go, I said, standing abruptly. I need to get to the bank before... The next text from Ryan stopped me cold. Mom's handling some paperwork for us. She says it's urgent. Don't go home, Sophia said, reading my expression. Stay here tonight. We can help you figure out... No. I gathered my things, mind racing. If I don't show up, they'll know something's wrong. I need to keep playing along until I can protect myself legally. The drive home felt like entering enemy territory. Ryan's car was already in the driveway, along with Evelyn's Mercedes. Through the living room window, I could see them sitting together, heads bent over documents. Inside, the air felt thick with anticipation. Ryan looked up with relief that seemed almost genuine. There you are. Mom's been helping me organize our finances, making everything more efficient. Evelyn smiled, sliding a stack of papers across the coffee table. Just a few signatures needed, dear. Standard power of attorney forms, in case anything happens to you, of course. Ryan needs to be able to manage your affairs. My pulse roared in my ears as I picked up the papers, pretending to read them. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to sit down instead. Actually, I said carefully, I've been thinking about our financial situation too. Ryan and Evelyn exchanged a quick glance. I'd like to meet with a financial advisor first, I continued, someone independent, to review everything. That won't be necessary, Evelyn said sharply. Then, softening her tone, we're family, dear. Family takes care of its own. I looked at Ryan, really looked at him, searching for any trace of the man I'd married. His eyes dropped to the floor. You're right, I said, picking up the pen. Family does take care of its own. I scribbled something that looked nothing like my signature on the last page, buying myself time. Tomorrow, I'd visit my lawyer with David's documents. Tonight, I needed to secure copies of our records before they disappeared. There, I smiled, standing up. All done. I should get some work done before bed. As I headed upstairs, I heard Evelyn's satisfied murmur. See? I told you she'd cooperate eventually. In our bedroom, I opened my laptop and began transferring files to a secure drive. My fake signature wouldn't hold up under scrutiny, I knew that. But it didn't need to. It just needed to keep them confident, while I dismantled their plan piece by piece. The weight of their betrayal pressed against my chest, but something else was growing stronger. Determination. They thought they were closing their trap, but they'd just given me exactly what I needed, proof of their intentions. Now the real work could begin. The annual Mitchell family dinner always felt like a performance, but tonight the air crackled with something darker. Evelyn had invited the entire extended family to celebrate our growing bonds. 20 relatives packed into our dining room, watching me serve the meal she'd insisted on planning. Iris, dear, the plates go on the left, Evelyn called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Though I suppose attention to detail isn't your strong suit lately. Ryan's cousins exchanged knowing looks. I set down the plates, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. For 2 weeks, I'd been gathering evidence, moving money, preparing my escape. I just needed to maintain the facade a little longer. Speaking of attention to detail, Evelyn continued, raising her voice further, Ryan tells me you've been making some concerning decisions at work. Turning down that lateral move he suggested? I froze. The lateral move was actually a demotion Ryan had tried to convince me to take. one that would have put me under his department's control. I'm happy in my current position, I said carefully. Happiness isn't everything, dear. Sometimes we need others to guide us when we're not thinking clearly. She turned to the table. Did I tell you all about the time Iris forgot to pay our property taxes? Thank goodness Ryan caught it in time. My fingers tightened around the serving spoon. I hadn't forgotten. Ryan had intercepted the mail and hidden the notice, then saved the day by paying it himself. Another piece of their gaslighting puzzle. Mother, Ryan warned softly, but Evelyn was on a roll. And now she's been meeting with strange men during work hours. That David Carter fellow? She shook her head sadly. When someone starts hiding things from their spouse. The serving spoon clattered to the floor. The room went silent. Would you like to know what I was really discussing with David? My voice came out surprisingly calm. We were talking about how you destroyed his company, how you're trying to do the same thing to me. Iris, Ryan stood up, his face flushing. That's enough. No, it's not. I pulled out my phone, opening the folder of evidence I'd been collecting. Should we discuss the $40,000 you stole from our savings? Or the power of attorney forms you tried to trick me into signing? Evelyn's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. Ryan, I think your wife is having another one of her episodes. Episodes? I laughed, the sound sharp and foreign. Like the ones you convinced David he was having before you took everything from him? You're embarrassing yourself, Ryan hissed, grabbing my arm. And you're upsetting Mother. I yanked away from him, addressing the shocked faces around the table. Did any of you know that Evelyn's broken pipes were a lie? That she moved in here to help Ryan isolate me from my friends? To gain control of my assets? That's absurd, Evelyn said, but several relatives shifted uncomfortably. They'd seen this before, I realized. They'd watched her do it to others. Show them the papers, Ryan, I challenged. Show them what you and your mother were trying to get me to sign. Instead of responding, Ryan turned to the guests. I'm so sorry, everyone. Iris has been under a lot of stress lately. Mother's been trying to help, but... Always the devoted son, I said quietly. Tell me, does it bother you that she's using the exact same playbook on me that she used on your father? Or does it feel normal now, watching her destroy someone else's life? The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn stood slowly, her composure cracking. I will not be spoken to this way in my own... Your home? I cut her off. This isn't your home, but you're right about one thing. I pulled off my wedding ring, letting it fall onto the dining table with a hollow ping. I don't belong here anymore. As I walked out, leaving the chaos behind me, I heard Ryan calling my name. But it was Evelyn's voice that followed me to the door, sharp with fury. You'll regret this, when you have nothing left. No. I turned back one last time. That's where you're wrong. For the first time since I met your son, I finally have everything I need. The truth. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click. In my car, my phone lit up with messages from Ryan's relatives, some expressing shock, others sharing their own stories of Evelyn's manipulation. The facade had cracked, and the truth was spilling out. It wasn't the revenge I'd planned, but somehow, this felt better. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about exposing them to the light. The police officer's flashlight beam cut through my car window, momentarily blinding me. Step out of the vehicle, Mrs. Mitchell. 3 hours after walking out of the family dinner, I'd returned home to collect some essentials. Instead, I found 2 police cruisers in my driveway and Ryan standing with Evelyn, his face a mask of concern. She's been acting erratically, I heard Evelyn say as I got out. We're worried she might harm herself, or others. The second officer was already searching my car. Ma'am, your husband says you took some important financial documents. He's concerned about your state of mind. Those documents prove they've been stealing from me. My voice shook despite my efforts to stay calm. Call my lawyer. She has copies. Your lawyer? Ryan stepped forward, perfect worry lines creasing his forehead. Honey, you don't have a lawyer. This paranoia started when you began meeting with Mother's ex-husband. The officers exchanged looks. Of course they'd believe him. the concerned husband, the devoted son protecting his mother. I'd played right into their hands by coming back alone at night. "Check my phone," I said. "The evidence." But my phone wasn't in my pocket. With horrifying clarity, I remembered setting it down on the kitchen counter when I'd come inside. Through the window, I could see Evelyn watching me, my phone visible in her hand. "Mrs. Mitchell," the first officer said gently, "we can do this voluntarily, or we can make it official. Your family's arranged for a psychiatric evaluation, for your own safety." The pieces clicked together. This was their endgame, not just controlling me, but discrediting me entirely. Once I was committed, even temporarily, everything I'd said about them would be dismissed as delusions. "Ryan," I turned to him, searching for any trace of the man I'd married. "You know what she's doing. You know this isn't right." Something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, maybe even guilt. But then Evelyn's hand touched his arm and his expression hardened. "I just want you to get help," he said. "Mother knows an excellent facility." "I bet she does?" I laughed, the sound bordering on hysteric. "Let me guess. The same one David ended up in before she took his company." "See how she obsesses over these conspiracy theories?" Evelyn's voice dripped with concern. "Officers, please, before she hurts herself." The police moved closer. Fight or flight instinct kicked in, but both options would only prove their point about my instability. I had to think bigger, longer term. "Okay," I said quietly. "I'll go voluntarily, but I want to call someone first." "I don't think," Evelyn started, but the officer nodded. "Supervised call only." I recited Sophia's number from memory, praying she'd understand what I couldn't say directly. When she answered, I kept my voice steady. "It's Iris. I'm at the house with Ryan and Evelyn. The police are here to take me for a psychiatric evaluation." I emphasized each word carefully. "Could you tell David I'm sorry I couldn't finish our business discussion about his old company records?" A pause. Then Sophia's voice, sharp with understanding. "Don't sign anything. We'll have someone there in 30 minutes. "That's enough," Evelyn snapped, moving to end the call. But it was enough. David's documented history with Evelyn, combined with the financial records I'd already given my lawyer, would raise too many questions for them to risk holding me. "Actually," the second officer said, checking his radio, "we just got a call from your lawyer, Mrs. Mitchell. She's requested we wait for her arrival." Evelyn's composure cracked. "This is ridiculous. My son has the right—" "Your son," I cut in, "doesn't have any rights over me. Those power of attorney papers were never legally signed." Ryan stepped toward me, but stopped when I flinched away. "Iris, please, let us help you." "Help me?" I looked between them, mother and son, their masks slipping to reveal the desperation beneath. "You never wanted to help me? You wanted to own me?" Flashing lights appeared at the end of the street, not police this time, but my lawyer's car. As it approached, I saw Evelyn's hand tighten on Ryan's arm, her nails digging in like talons. The game wasn't over, but the rules had changed. They'd pushed me to the edge, thinking I'd break. Instead, they'd given me exactly what I needed, proof of how far they'd go to maintain control. Now it was my turn to push back. The bank manager's office felt too small for the storm brewing inside it. Ryan sat across from me, his lawyer nervously shuffling papers, while my own attorney laid out documents like playing cards in a high-stakes game. "As you can see," she said, "these transfers were made without Mrs. Mitchell's knowledge or consent. Furthermore, we have evidence of systematic financial manipulation dating back 18 months. Ryan's face remained carefully blank, but his fingers drummed against his knee, a tell I'd learned to recognize during poker nights that felt like a lifetime ago. "There must be some mistake," his lawyer started, but I cut in. "Show him the Cayman accounts." The color drained from Ryan's face. "How did you—" "David kept excellent records," I said quietly, "including the offshore accounts Evelyn used to hide his company's assets before she took control. Funny how you used the exact same bank." A knock at the door made us all jump. The bank manager stepped back in, looking grave. "Mrs. Mitchell, the transfer you requested is complete. All joint accounts have been frozen pending investigation." Ryan's phone buzzed. I could picture Evelyn's name flashing on the screen, her carefully constructed world starting to crumble as her access to the money vanished. "You can't do this," Ryan's voice cracked. Your mother needs to pay back what she stole." I leaned forward. From me, from David, from everyone she's manipulated over the years, the DA is very interested in her pattern of financial exploitation. His phone buzzed again, more urgent this time. Ryan stared at it like a lifeline. "Go ahead," I said. "Answer it. Let her know that her safety net is gone, that her precious son can't fix this for her." Instead, he switched the phone off. For the first time since this began, I saw something shift in his eyes, like a spell breaking. "I never meant," he started, then stopped. "The money was supposed to be temporary, just until Mother got back on her feet." "Like it was temporary with David? With your father?" I pulled out one final document, a bank statement showing recent transfers to a private psychiatric facility. "Or were you planning to make me disappear like the others who stood up to her?" The lawyer beside him stiffened, clearly hearing this for the first time. "That wasn't... I wouldn't have..." Ryan's facade cracked completely. "She said it was for your own good, that you needed help. The only thing I needed was a husband strong enough to choose me over his mother's manipulation." A commotion outside the office drew our attention. Through the glass wall, I saw Evelyn arguing with security, her perfectly maintained appearance showing signs of strain. When she spotted me, her eyes narrowed with a hatred that made my skin crawl. "Mr. Mitchell," my lawyer said firmly, "your mother is not permitted on these premises during these proceedings. If she enters this room, we will add harassment to the charges." Ryan stood up, torn between decades of conditioning and the truth laying bare before him. For a moment, I saw the man I'd married, scared, confused, desperate for approval. "I did love you," he said softly. "I know. That's what made it so easy for her to use you against me." He moved toward the door, then paused. "What happens now?" "Now?" I met his gaze steadily. "Now you get to choose. But whatever you decide, I'm done being a character in your mother's power plays." As he stepped out, I heard Evelyn's voice rise. "Ryan, darling, tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Your wife is clearly unwell." The door closed, muffling their voices. Through the glass, I watched Ryan straighten his shoulders and, for the first time in our marriage, walk away from his mother's outstretched hand. My lawyer gathered the documents, her expression satisfied. "The criminal investigation will take time, but with David's evidence and the bank records..." I barely heard her. I was watching Evelyn's face as security escorted her out, her mask finally shattering to reveal the desperate, frightened woman beneath. The woman who'd spent her life destroying others to maintain control, only to end up more alone than ever. It wasn't the revenge I'd imagined, but somehow it felt more complete. Sometimes the best punishment isn't what you do to your enemies, but what they do to themselves when their lies finally catch up with them. The support group circle felt intimate yet exposed, like standing in a spotlight that illuminated only the truth. 12 women, each carrying stories that echoed fragments of my own. "My name is Iris," I said, my voice steady, "and I'm here because survival isn't enough anymore." The conference room at David and Sophia's law firm had become a sanctuary every Wednesday evening, a place where masks could fall away, where manipulation lost its power in the light of shared experience. "The criminal charges against Evelyn go to trial next month," I continued, "but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because yesterday, I saw a woman at my bank showing the same signs I missed 3 years ago. The controlled movements, the nervous glances at her husband, the careful answers about her own money." The door opened quietly, and Sarah, my friend from work, the one Evelyn had tried to separate me from, slipped in. She gave me an encouraging nod. "I watched this woman sign away her financial independence," I said, "and I realized that revenge wasn't what I needed. What I needed was to turn this pain into something useful." A text message lit up my phone. Ryan's name. I'd received dozens since the investigation began, each one a mixture of apology and justification. Each one deleted, unread. Some wounds weren't meant to be reopened. "The legal fund we're building," I gestured to the donation box by the door. isn't just about money. It's about giving women the resources I almost lost, the power to fight back before they lose themselves. Later in David's office, we reviewed the latest case files. 3 more women had come forward with stories about Evelyn's past schemes. The pattern stretched back decades, each victim isolated and discredited until they believed their own destruction was their fault. The DA thinks she'll take a plea deal, David said, his eyes tired but satisfied. Too much evidence, too many witnesses. And Ryan? Cooperating finally, though I suspect that has more to do with protecting himself than finding redemption. Through the window, I could see Evelyn's Mercedes being sold at auction, along with the other assets frozen by the investigation. The sight didn't bring the satisfaction I'd once craved. Instead, I felt something closer to peace, not because of what I'd taken from her, but because of what I'd reclaimed for myself. Sophia entered with a stack of intake forms. 3 new members for next week's group, word spreading. Good, I said, picking up my bag, but right now I have a bank to visit. The same teller who'd helped me freeze my accounts months ago recognized me immediately. She gestured subtly toward a woman filling out forms at a desk, the one I'd noticed yesterday, the one whose hands shook just like mine once had. I approached carefully, noting how she angled the paperwork away from view, a learned behavior hiding in plain sight. "Excuse me," I said softly. "I couldn't help but notice your filling out power of attorney forms." She stiffened, a flash of fear crossing her face. "My husband says it's necessary for tax purposes." The familiar words hit like an echo. I placed one of our support group cards on her desk. "Before you sign," I said, "I'd like to tell you a story about tax purposes, about a woman who almost lost everything because she trusted the wrong people to define her worth." She hesitated, then picked up the card. Our eyes met, and I saw something spark behind her uncertainty, the same ember of defiance I'd discovered in myself. "Would you like to hear that story?" I asked. She glanced at the unsigned forms, then back at me. Nodded slowly. As we walked toward the coffee shop across the street, I felt the weight of my own journey settle into something stronger than revenge, more lasting than justice. Every woman who found her way to our group was another link in a chain of resistance, each one stronger for having been tested. The story wasn't over, but at least now we were the ones writing it.
Stop leeching off me, you parasite. For over 20 years, I thought I had devoted myself to Tom. But was this how he really saw me? I wasn't leeching off him, I was just trying to support him. Despite thinking this, I couldn't find the words to say it. As my strength drained away, Tom continued. "John is a working adult now. So there's no reason for you to keep leeching off me anymore. But shut up. I don't want to hear your excuses." Tom shouted. It's no use, my feelings aren't reaching him. I felt something break inside me right then, like the love thread between our hearts snapped. At the same time, my feelings for Tom began to fade. Just moments ago, we were husband and wife, but now he felt like a stranger. Tom had been using me all along, he never really loved me. If he did, he wouldn't have been so brazen about his affairs or tried to kick me out. I don't care what happens to a man like him. No, I have to destroy him completely. I made up my mind and raised my head to look directly at Tom. "My name is Emily Johnson. I'm a 50-year-old housewife, married to Tom for 25 years. Our son, John, who was born a few years after we married, graduated from college and started working this year. With child-rearing behind me, I can finally focus on doing what I want. At least, that's what I've been thinking lately. But there's one problem, my relationship with Tom. He hasn't been a good husband or a dad, far from it. Finding his good qualities is like searching for a needle in a haystack. He cheats on me and doesn't even give me a proper share of his salary. Could you at least give us enough for living expenses? Huh? Who do you think you are, talking back to me when I'm the one providing for you? Tom always snaps back like this. Maybe it's hopeless, divorce might be the only option. Lately, I've been thinking that more and more. But I can't just ask for a divorce so easily. The truth is, my father-in-law, who is sick and hospitalized, has asked me to look after Tom. I owe Tom's dad, so I need to endure as long as I can, I tell myself. I can't ignore his words, but the desire to divorce is strong. Torn between these conflicting emotions, I found myself reminiscing about the happy times before our marriage. The happiness I found before getting married stemmed from a tragedy that struck my family. My parents ran a small diner. My dad was the cook, and my mom handled the service. Of course, the food was delicious. But my dad was terrible at business. He started the diner because he wanted to feed people good food until they were full. That's a noble sentiment, but he ran the place solely on that principle. He rarely thought about profit. As long as customers left satisfied, that was enough for him. Naturally, our finances were always tight. Even so, I felt proud as a child to see customers leave satisfied. So I never interfered with my dad's way of doing business. But when I was in college, disaster struck. The company that supplied ingredients to my dad's diner went bankrupt due to the recession. We've already paid this month's bill. If this keeps up, we'll have to close the diner, my dad lamented. Our finances were already on the brink. There was no extra money to cover the loss. Seeing my parents so downcast made me anxious too. But as a college student, there was nothing I could do. And it didn't seem likely that the bankrupt company could refund us. The only path left for us seemed to be closing the diner. That's when one of our regulars, a man, spoke up. Close the diner? It's such good food, that would be a waste. But the company that supplied our ingredients went bankrupt. And now we'll have to take on debt. In that case, I'll personally lend you the money to keep the diner going. And just like that, our regular customer really did lend my dad the money. Thank you. We'll definitely pay you back. Take your time with the money. Just make sure to keep serving that delicious food. With those words, the man left the diner. After that, my dad began dealing with another food supplier. It was a large wholesaler, and the cost of ingredients was even cheaper than before. Thanks to that bit of luck, our diner narrowly avoided bankruptcy. About a year later, I went with my dad to repay the man. While they were talking, a young man approached me. So, you borrowed money from my dad, huh? When I heard the story, I realized he was the son of the man who had lent us the money. His name was Tom, and he worked at his dad's company. You're pretty. How about going out with me sometime? Huh? With you? Come on, think of it as a way to repay the favor for the loan. It's true that the money he lent us saved us. But my dad already expressed his gratitude properly. I didn't owe him anything more. Or so I thought, until Tom leaned in and whispered in my ear. Wouldn't want people to think the daughter of a diner owner is ungrateful. I could spread that around, you know. But I couldn't argue back. Even if he did spread rumors, it wouldn't hurt me directly. But it might cause trouble for my dad. What would the customers at the diner think? These thoughts stopped me from rejecting Tom's offer. I didn't want to, but I told myself I'd endure it just this once. So, I went out with Tom. But to my surprise, I actually ended up having a good time. Tom's stories were interesting, and he knew all the best places to go. The restaurants he chose were stylish and impressive. My first impression of him had been awful, but maybe he wasn't so bad after all. That was where I made my mistake. Before I knew it, Tom had me wrapped around his finger. I enjoy being with you, Emily. I enjoy it too. For the first time, I feel like I could marry someone as good and genuine as you. Swayed by such simple words, I began dating Tom with marriage in mind. Over time, Tom continued to win me over with various tactics. Eventually, I married him a few years later. Of course, at the time, I had no idea that marrying Tom was falling into a trap. He was kind to me, and I genuinely believed he loved me. But it was all a lie. As soon as we got married, Tom showed his true colors. Here's this month's pay. Make it work. I opened the envelope Tom handed me. Inside was his pay slip. His salary was deposited directly into our account. So there was nothing unusual about just getting the slip. But one thing struck me as odd: the pay slip was handwritten. Nowadays, that's almost unheard of, but 25 years ago, when we got married, it wasn't uncommon for things to be handwritten, as personal computers were just starting to become mainstream. $1,000. I guess this is normal, I muttered to myself, trying to reassure myself as I made ends meet with the small amount of money. As our marriage went on, I started noticing other things that felt off. Like Tom's routine. He would head out of the house at the usual time each morning. But when he'd be back changed daily. "I'm busy with all kinds of work since I'm taking over for my dad," he'd say. "Then at least call before you come home. You're so annoying." "Fine. I'll call you," Tom shouted. His outburst only made my unease grow. Was he spending his time out somewhere? Could he be seeing someone else? These thoughts crossed my mind, but I was too afraid of his shouting to confront him. In the end, despite my suspicions about Tom, I kept silent. Soon, John was born. I thought that with a baby, Tom might change a little. But he didn't. In hindsight, it was around this time that I first began to vaguely consider divorce. Then, when John was just entering middle school, I got a call from my mom while I was out shopping for dinner. "What? Dad's been hospitalized?" It was news that my dad had been admitted to the hospital. I rushed there in a panic. "Your mom was just being dramatic," my dad said with a hearty laugh, and I felt relieved. But then, I remembered something that made my heart skip a beat. I forgot to tell Tom. It was too late. My phone showed numerous missed calls from him. When I finally called back, Tom's irritated voice greeted me. "Where the hell are you? Get home and make my dinner." "I'm sorry. My dad." "What? Your dad?" Tom's tone grew harsher. I replied in a small voice. "Yes, he was suddenly hospitalized." "Who cares about your dad? You're my wife." Tom's shouting made me flinch and close my eyes. I was terrified of his yelling. But I couldn't back down now. Steeling myself, I spoke up. "Is it wrong to worry about my dad? Is that too much to ask?" "Shut up. Don't you dare talk back to me." "No, I'm going to speak my mind. If it were your dad, you'd rush to his side, wouldn't you?" I asked, expecting him to reflect on the situation. But Tom's response was beyond anything I could have imagined. "Huh? If my dad was hospitalized, I'd ignore it. It's not like I need him around." I was speechless. He had to be lying. But I couldn't bring myself to argue. After a long pause, I finally said to Tom, "I'm not like you. I'm sorry, but you're on your own for dinner tonight. That was all I could manage before I ended the call, still in shock. After that incident, I realized I could no longer trust Tom. It finally dawned on me that the happiness I had before we got married was just an illusion. Oh, I see. Tom didn't want a wife, he wanted a maid. I muttered to myself, feeling a pang of sadness. But I knew I couldn't let myself wallow in it. Right, if I'm going to divorce him, I need to start preparing. I began planning for a divorce. A few years later, Tom's dad was hospitalized, and his condition was quite serious. He might not be able to come home again. I relayed the doctor's words to Tom, but he remained unfazed. So, it's going to cost money, huh? This isn't the time to be worrying about money. Don't you understand? I get it. I'll talk to my brother. Tom contacted his brother, who was married but childless, hoping he might cover the hospital expenses. Can you take care of it? Things are tough for me with John and Emily to support, Tom said. As if it were someone else's problem. The way he spoke reminded me of how he reacted when my own dad was hospitalized. It was clear Tom didn't care at all about his own dad. I couldn't hold back any longer. Enough. I'll figure out how to cover Dad's hospital expenses myself. Don't forget you said that. Tom shouted. I nodded firmly. In the end, my outburst led to us taking on the burden of Tom's dad's hospital bills. Eventually, Tom's dad stepped down from his position as president of the company due to his illness, and Tom took over the role. But Tom was clearly displeased with me taking charge of the situation. Tom has been rarely showing up at home ever since. Even when it was time to discuss John's future, Tom ignored my calls and didn't come home. Dad's not coming home again today, is he? John asked one evening. I'm sorry, John. I didn't mean to drag you into this. It's fine. I don't care about him. But I want to go to college in Tokyo. That's right. Don't worry about the tuition, I'll figure it out. Before long, John was accepted to a university in Tokyo. Unsurprisingly, Tom didn't even see him off. After John moved to Tokyo, the house felt incredibly empty. By that time, Tom was only coming home about once a week. Can you transfer a bit more money? We've got your dad's hospital bills, after all. Huh? I'm already transferring more than half my salary. It's just you now, so it should be enough. The money Tom was sending was only a fraction of his salary. It was obvious he was lying about the amount. But I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. A few years later, I got the news that John had found a job. John's got a job now, so maybe it's finally time to talk about divorce. I had everything in place for the divorce. All that was left was to figure out the timing. When and where could I bring it up without making things worse? That's all I could think about. Then one day, after visiting Tom's dad in the hospital, I came home as usual. As I went to unlock the front door, I was startled to find it already open. Could it be a burglar? I nervously peeked inside. From the living room, I heard the sound of the TV and Tom's laughter. He was home. Relieved, I walked into the living room. There, I found Tom laughing loudly at the TV. So you're home? Yeah, I thought I'd tidy up the house a bit. Tidying up? I looked around the room as Tom said that. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that some things were missing. Wait, it feels like something's missing. Oh, yeah. I threw them out. Your stuff. You threw out my things? Shocked, I rushed to my room. The room was nearly empty. My computer, my TV, even my favorite mug was gone. And worse, my bed and everything else had disappeared. What is this? What did you do? I got rid of it because you don't need it anymore. Don't need it? What am I supposed to do now? I raised my voice, and Tom frowned, turning his gaze away with a sigh. How do I put this? I'm tired of supporting you. What? I'm your wife. I snapped back, and Tom's face twisted with anger. He suddenly shouted. Do I have to spell it out for you? Stop leeching off me, you freeloader. For over 20 years, I thought I had been devoting myself to Tom. But was this really how he saw me? I wasn't leeching off him, I was just trying to support him. Even though I wanted to say this, I couldn't find the words. My strength left me as Tom continued. John is a working adult now. So there's no reason for you to keep leeching off me anymore. But shut up. I don't want to hear your excuses. Tom yelled. It was over. My feelings didn't reach him. I felt something break inside me right then. Like the love thread between our hearts snapped. At the same time, my feelings for Tom began to fade. Moments ago, we were husband and wife, but now he felt like a stranger. Tom had been using me all along, he never really loved me. If he had, he wouldn't have been so brazen about his affairs or tried to kick me out like this. I didn't care what happened to a man like him anymore. No, I had to destroy him completely. I made up my mind and raised my head to look directly at Tom. What? You got something to say? No. If you want me to leave, then I'll leave. I slammed the living room door and stormed toward my room. But there was nothing left. Not even a single piece of clothing remained. Don't bother looking. I had everything taken away by the junk removal service. Which service? There's a flyer right there. That's the one. I picked up the flyer that had fallen to the floor. As I dialed the number, I shot a final remark at Tom. You're going to regret this. I stormed out of the house. After a moment, the call connected. When I explained the situation, the person on the other end quickly understood. Apparently, they had noticed something off about Tom's behavior. And had kept everything in storage just in case. We'll bring your belongings to you right away. Thank you for your understanding. I thanked them sincerely and ended the call. I then went to the storage facility, thanked the staff again, and had my belongings moved to a storage unit I had just rented. I felt relieved knowing that my things were safe. You're not going to get away with this, Tom. I muttered to myself as I dialed John's number. After briefly explaining the situation, I finished with, So, I've decided to move out and proceed with the divorce. Make sure you're ready too, John. Okay? Okay. Got it. John quickly ended the call, sounding a bit nervous. Was I that angry? I wondered as I put my phone back in my bag. I headed to a nearby business hotel. The truth is, I already had a new place lined up. The reason was simple, I had been planning to discuss the divorce with Tom soon. After the divorce, I would move there and start my new life. Well, it just happened a bit sooner than I expected. Honestly, I wasn't too bothered. My plan was only moved up by about 2 weeks. 2 weeks in a hotel. What a waste. I couldn't help but think it was a waste of money, an old habit from my years as a housewife. Maybe I should bill him for the hotel costs too? Well, whatever happens, Tom better be prepared. After murmuring to myself, I started executing the post-divorce plans I had been considering. 10 days into my stay at the business hotel, I received a call from Tom while I was having lunch. The moment I answered, Tom's voice boomed through the phone. You stole my money. What? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. It's about my dad's hospital bill. The hospital just called and said we need to pay. Ah, so that's what this is about. I sighed before responding calmly. That's your responsibility, isn't it? I was kicked out, so it's not my problem anymore. I've been transferring money for your living expenses. That should be paying for it. True, but isn't the checkbook for that account with you now? I replied with a straight face, knowing full well that there was no money left in that account. I couldn't help but smirk. I've got the checkbook, but there's nothing in the account. That's why I'm saying you stole it. I didn't steal anything. Don't lie. Who else could have spent it? Doesn't he realize how little he was transferring? I thought to myself, then said. There was only a small amount to begin with. If you're short on money, why don't you use your allowance? Allowance. Tom began to panic noticeably. It seemed he thought I didn't know about it. From the beginning of our marriage, Tom had been giving me handwritten pay stubs. He did this to hide the fact that he was skimming money from his salary, which became his personal allowance. Earlier, I asked your dad about your salary. I asked him how much you get. That's. He seemed a bit puzzled, but he told me. So, I know you've been pocketing some money. Tom fell silent. The silence stretched on, making me wonder if he had hung up. Finally, he broke the silence, yelling. What's wrong with me spending the money I earn? You're the one who blew through what I gave you. Yeah. So what? This is it. We're getting divorced. I'm going to demand alimony. And you better pay back the money you stole. At that moment, I couldn't help but smile. He had just given me exactly what I needed. Now, Tom wouldn't be able to weasel out of this. With a grin, I responded. Oh, thank you. I've been wanting a divorce too. Let's meet to discuss the details. Why don't you come over to my place? What? No, wait. You want a divorce, right? I'll be waiting with the evidence of your affairs. I couldn't see his face, but I could tell Tom was probably turning pale. His voice betrayed his panic. Evidence? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I have the photos. Photos? I could almost picture him struggling in my thoughts. And I had to hold back a chuckle as I kept going. I'll give you the address. Let's meet next Sunday to go over everything. I gave him the address of a certain place and quickly ended the call. Success. Now I just need to make him apologize. Honestly, this was going to be the hardest part. I steeled myself for the task ahead. Then came Sunday. I arrived at the meeting place ahead of time. He should be here soon. I scanned the area and spotted Tom out of the corner of my eye. Over here. I waved at him and he looked up, startled. What? Here? Yes, I told you the address. But, whose mansion is this? Tom looked past me at the house behind. It was a luxurious mansion worth about $1 million. Much larger than a typical home, it had a garden, 3 stories, a basement, and even a theater room. In the attached garage sat a luxury car. I pointed at the mansion with a smile. This is my house. It's brand new, isn't it beautiful? What? This is your house? Yes, that's right. I had this house built a while ago, planning to live here after the divorce. The place I had called Tom to was indeed my newly built home. Naturally, Tom, who still thought of me as just a housewife, was completely stunned. I gently pushed him forward and led him inside. I guided him to the living room. Now, shall we get down to business? This is my lawyer, I said, introducing the lawyer who had been waiting inside. But Tom was too distracted to pay attention. He looked nervous, his eyes darting around the room, barely focusing on anything. He didn't even glance at the evidence of his infidelity laid out on the table. He wasn't responding to any questions either, making it impossible to have a proper conversation. Finally, after a long pause, he muttered, "How did you afford a house like this? Is that really what you're worried about?" I thought, but I decided to answer him. I bought it, of course. Don't lie. There's no way a housewife could afford this. It's true that buying a house worth $1 million usually requires an income of around $150,000 a year. But I had that kind of income, so I calmly replied, "It just means I earn that much." "Do you have a problem with that?" "But how?" A friend's company needed help, so I pitched in, and before I knew it, things started going well, I explained. The story went back a few years. When my dad was hospitalized, and there was tension over that, I decided to divorce Tom. That's when I started preparing for it, beginning by finding a job. I needed a job to support myself after the divorce, but good jobs were hard to find. So I turned to my best friend, Catherine, for advice. "Why don't you help me with my work?" she suggested. "Work? What kind of work?" "Aquaculture farming on land." Aquaculture farming on land involves creating artificial pools to farm fish, which has the advantage of preventing ocean pollution. Catherine's dad had started such a business, and Catherine had taken over. "So, you worked there?" Tom asked hesitantly. After I started helping, the business suddenly took off. My role was mainly negotiation and administrative tasks. But Catherine appreciated it and eventually appointed me to an executive position. It was all just a string of lucky coincidences, but I think luck can also be seen as a skill. Hearing this, Tom slumped down, but then suddenly raised his head. "Okay. Let's forget about the divorce. Why don't we start over? What is he even saying?" I thought this to myself as I gave him a cold look and replied, "Are you kidding me? In your dreams." "No, I'm serious. I really want to start over with you," Tom pleaded passionately. But I knew it was just my money he was after, so I raised my eyebrows and retorted, "I don't want anything to do with a cheater like you. And someone who disrespects his dad." "But about my dad." "Shut up. I doubt you know this, but I've been paying for your dad's hospital bills." Tom had only been giving me a small amount of money, barely enough to cover food, utilities, and other essentials. There was never anything left, so of course, there wasn't enough to cover the hospital bills. Initially, I managed to pay by scraping by, but once I started working, I used my salary to cover the expenses. "And yet you never listened to me, and you didn't even visit your dad in the hospital." "Well, I mean, how could I trust someone like you?" I shouted, and Tom shrank back. After that, my lawyer discussed the alimony. Tom didn't argue, he just kept nodding. In the end, he was persuaded by the lawyer to sign the divorce papers, and we agreed on alimony of $30,000. Now that the divorce is finalized, You'll be responsible for your dad's hospital bills from now on. Yeah, Tom muttered reluctantly, but at least he didn't argue. I felt a sense of relief. Finally, I saw him out, practically pushing him out the door. It's finally over. The only thing that bothered me was that Tom never apologized. But I had one last card to play. Once I did, I was sure he would apologize. The thought brought a smile to my face. A few days later, as I was heading home after stopping by the office, I heard a voice behind me. Hey, Emily. I turned around to see Tom standing there. Don't call me so casually. We're divorced now. Shut up. What did you do? Tom was glaring at me, his face flushed with anger. From the look on his face, I realized that the news must have reached the company. Smiling, I replied, "What do you think I did? Don't play games with me. Tell me what you did. How did you get me fired?" Tom stomped his foot in frustration, which I found amusing. And I couldn't help but smile. It's your own fault. You were caught having an affair with the company secretary. Tom's affair was with his company's secretary. He thought he could do whatever he wanted just because he was the president. So, right after our divorce was finalized, I informed his dad about the affair. His dad was disappointed about the divorce but furious about Tom's behavior. When I showed him the photos as proof, his anger only intensified. He told me, "I've decided to transfer all of my shares in the company to you, Emily." To me? Wouldn't it make more sense to give them to Tom's brother? No, I'm giving them to you. I want you to remove Tom from the president's position. Here's how it worked. Tom's dad's company was a corporation, meaning decisions like appointing executives required a resolution at the shareholders' meeting. In this case, most of the company's shares were held by Tom's dad, meaning he had the power to make decisions on his own. In small companies, it's common for the president to hold the majority of the shares. When Tom's dad transferred all his shares to me, I gained the sole decision-making power. However, it wasn't my decision to remove Tom. I informed his brother about the shares I had acquired and about Tom's affair. His brother then took the necessary steps. Your brother did what was best for the company, I said. That jerk. Why would he listen to you? He didn't just listen to me. He did what was best for the company's future. As I said this, Tom collapsed to the ground and began muttering an apology. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. No. If I lose my job, I'll be out on the street. That's not my concern. This is all his own doing. Even if you apologize, I won't forgive you. Please. I'm begging you. Tom dropped to his knees, bowing low to the ground. I turned my back on him. Sorry, but there's nothing I can do. Why not? If you're the one with the shares, I sold them to your brother and his wife. I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. At that moment, I heard Tom start to sob. Of course, I pretended not to notice as I walked away. After being removed from his position as president, Tom was forced to leave the company. If he had been a dual-role employee and officer, he might have been able to stay on as an employee. But Tom had gotten the job through his dad's influence and had always been arrogant. I'd rather not be just an employee, he had once said. Because of that, he was thrown out as soon as he was removed from his position. I heard he's now working part-time at a supermarket, but at his age, finding another full-time job will be tough. He'll likely spend his old age full of regret and without much money. As for me, after the divorce, I've been able to focus even more on my work. I don't see myself getting married again. But I do have a couple of male friends from work. Maybe a new chapter of life could start for me too. It was while I was thinking about that when I received a call from John. Mom, I'm going to bring my girlfriend over soon. Really? I'm looking forward to it. I might have failed in my marriage, but I don't want John to make the same mistakes. I'm positive he'll do fine. He's way more level-headed than I ever was. Did you get the package? Starting today, Mom will be living with us, so be prepared. Tom said casually over the phone. Yes, I received the package. Tom had decided, without my consent, that his mother would move in with us. Mom's coming today, so make sure to help her settle in. Mom, when will he ever cut the cord? Tom, who constantly belittled and looked down on me, his wife. I had reached my limit. I wasn't going to let him have his way anymore. And I certainly wasn't going to live with a mother-in-law who had treated me poorly. Well, that's interesting. I just moved out of the house myself. I had finally had enough of Tom, with his selfishness and financial irresponsibility. I chose to leave him and embrace my freedom. What happened to him and his mother afterward was beyond anyone's imagination. My name is Emily. After graduating from university, I joined a securities firm and was entrusted with sales. There were days when I couldn't even take a proper lunch break while out visiting clients. However, my hard work paid off, and I quickly became one of the top performers in the company. The reason I was able to work so hard was because I wanted to repay my mother. My father passed away when I was young, and my mother raised me on her own. She worked day and night, ensuring I never felt the absence of a father. Thanks to her, I was able to graduate from university. Despite being so busy, my mother never missed any of my school events, and always packed me lunches filled with love. She never once complained, always greeting me with a bright smile. After I secured a job, my mother finally reduced her workload, allowing her to have more time for herself. She had worked so hard for me, and now I wanted her to enjoy a slow and joyful life. It was my turn to work hard for her. One afternoon, I was killing time in a coffee shop. I had about 30 minutes until my next client meeting. I decided to enjoy a nice cup of coffee and relax for a change. The coffee shop in the business district was bustling with office workers. Despite the time of day, some, like me, were passing the time, others were working on their laptops, and a few were in the middle of business meetings. Everyone was spending their time in their own way. It was rare for me to have a moment to observe people like this, so I decided to enjoy my limited time alone. Suddenly, I made eye contact with a man sitting a few seats away. Embarrassed by my wandering gaze, I quickly looked away. I then turned my attention to my phone. There was still some time before my meeting. Hi, is that Emily? The man who had caught my eye earlier approached me. Wait, what? Startled by the sudden conversation, I dropped my phone. You're still as clumsy as ever. The man laughed loudly and picked up my phone. I was frozen, trying to figure out who this man was. It's me, Tom. We were in the same seminar group in university. That's right. I remembered now. He always sat behind me in our seminar classes, talking to me with the same bright smile he had now. Tom. It's been so long. We lost touch after graduation, so I never thought we'd run into each other like this. I was genuinely happy to see him again. Back in university, I had always enjoyed hearing his laughter from behind me. He was popular, well liked by everyone. Oh no, it's almost time for my meeting. I've got to go. The clock was nearing my meeting time. I couldn't be late. I hurriedly got ready to leave the shop. Wait. Give me your contact information. I quickly pulled out my phone. From that day on, we started staying in touch. He worked as a delivery driver for a courier company and was often in the area of my office. As a result, we began to see each other more frequently during work. And our relationship quickly grew closer, eventually leading to us dating. It felt like fate had brought us back together. 3 years after we started dating, he proposed to me. It felt like a dream. I imagined our married life filled with laughter and happiness. Our marriage was supposed to be full of joy. But then something happened that changed everything. Emily, you were raised by a single mother? When I visited Tom's parents' house to greet them after our engagement, the conversation turned to my parents. And when Tom's mother learned that my father had passed away long ago, she frowned. Did your mother really raise you with love and care? Tom's mother, who was sitting across from me at the table in the guest room, looked troubled. I was a bit taken aback by her unexpected reaction. Of course, my mother worked day and night to raise me. But she always took time off for my birthday and Christmas. She also made me lunch every day and attended all my school events. I wondered if she held some prejudice just because I was raised by a single parent. Taking time off for birthdays and Christmas, making lunch, and attending school events, those are things any mother should do. That doesn't prove anything. Isn't doing what's expected as a mother a sign of love? I didn't know how to respond. And you're still contributing your earnings to the household, right? If you're struggling so much, your mother should be working more. It felt like she was insulting my mother, and I couldn't help but feel disheartened. Children from single-parent families often receive less love, which can lead to distorted personalities and a greedy attitude towards money. It's quite concerning. Even if she had such prejudices, was it appropriate to say them in front of me? I was beginning to feel afraid of my future mother-in-law. What are you talking about? Just because she was raised by a single parent doesn't mean there's anything wrong with her. Emily has grown up to be an admirable person. She works at a well-known securities company that you see on TV commercials all the time. Tom, you better work hard too, or your income might fall behind Emily's. At that moment, Tom's father, who was sitting next to his wife, spoke up with a mix of seriousness and humor. It was true that I earned more than Tom, but I didn't mind that at all. Your mother must be very happy that her daughter, whom she raised with such dedication, is getting married. Tom's father gave me a warm smile as he said this. Emily, from now on, consider me your real father. If anything happens, let me know. I'll do whatever I can to help. Those words from my father-in-law brought me immense comfort. Thank you. I appreciate it, I said, looking into his eyes. My heart felt warm, and I was on the verge of tears. But when I looked to the side, I saw Tom's mother's stern face, clearly not convinced about our marriage. I look forward to your continued support, I said at the entrance and left their house. Same here. Take care on your way back. Tom's father said kindly, while his wife glared at me silently. Her gaze was more terrifying than any words, and I left their house with lingering anxiety. A few months later, our wedding took place. It was a small ceremony in a suburban wedding hall, with only close family members invited. The ceremony went smoothly, and we pledged our eternal love in front of our families. After that, a small reception was held, with our relatives gathered around us, enjoying the meal together. This was actually the first time my mother and Tom's mother met. Normally, there would have been several opportunities for the families to meet before the wedding, such as during the engagement or a formal meeting. But Tom's mother had fallen ill every time and never attended. Whether she was genuinely sick or just pretending, I couldn't be sure. So, this was also my first time seeing her again since our engagement greeting. Nice to meet you, Helen. I'm Lisa. I'm so happy to have such a wonderful connection through this marriage, my mother said to Tom's mother, looking a bit nervous. I look forward to our continued relationship, my mother said with a smile. Tom's mother responded with a small voice, sighing. I wish we had chosen a daughter from a more respectable family. I don't know if my mother heard her, but she maintained her gentle smile. After that, Tom's mother started chatting happily with her relatives and never once made eye contact with my family. Thank you for coming today, Mom. You must be tired, I said as we walked through the bustling streets on the way home from the reception. The lively neon lights and the cheerful voices of the people filled the night. A city that didn't seem ready to sleep. Not at all. It was a beautiful ceremony. The food was delicious. Thank you, my mother replied with her usual smile. Tomorrow is the day, isn't it? You're leaving home and starting your life with Tom, she added. That's right. Tomorrow, I will finally leave my parents' home and start a new life with my husband. Sometimes, you might have disagreements and even argue. But when that happens, make sure to face each other and talk it out. As long as you care for each other, you can overcome anything. And always hold hands and stay together as a couple. That's the greatest happiness. My mother had likely gone through many hardships after losing my father. Her words resonated deeply with me. Emily, be happy, she said with a warm smile. The neon lights reflected off her eyes, making them sparkle. Yes, thank you, Mom. I fought back the tears that threatened to overflow. Together, we left the lively streets behind and returned to our quiet home. The next day, my married life with Tom began. We rented an apartment under my name, but we decided to split the rent equally. My work was going well, and I gained even more clients. As a result, I became busier than ever, with more overtime and late nights at the office. Tom would always greet me with a smile when I returned home exhausted, and would have dinner ready for me. Our dinners together were so enjoyable that they wiped away all my fatigue. Tom was supportive, sharing the household chores and understanding the demands of my job. His massages before bed were the perfect remedy for my tense muscles, and I was deeply grateful for his kindness. Tom cherished his parents, especially his mother. Because of this, he would always take me to visit his parents' house on the weekends. However, those visits were far from enjoyable for me. What? You let Tom make dinner every night? Tom's mother would scowl again. The start of another painful visit. That's why I don't like people from single-parent families. They haven't been properly raised. You think working is everything and neglect your household duties. Poor Tom, he's tired too. But I always made breakfast and lunch for us. Growing up poor, you're so obsessed with money. That's why you prioritize work over your family. I really don't like single-parent families. Yes, money is important. But my reason for working isn't just for the money. It's to grow as a professional. Plus, Tom has his favorite car, he can go golfing with his colleagues. And we sometimes enjoy luxurious meals at his parents' house, all because I work. You stay out late doing a job you love and leave all the housework to Tom. You're so selfish. It's a typical trait of someone raised in a single-parent household. Her spiteful words kept coming. It was clear she couldn't stand the fact that I was raised by a single parent. Tom never argued with her, he just listened with a smile. I would always keep my head down. The person who always helped me in those moments was Tom's father. "What are you talking about?" "Helen, you've never worked, so you wouldn't know. Working means taking on heavy responsibilities. It's fulfilling, but it's also incredibly stressful." Thanks to his words, I would always find the strength to lift my head. Besides, thanks to Emily, Tom is living happily. There's no problem at all. Emily, thank you for everything. Thanks to Tom's father, I could endure his mother's harsh words. He felt like a real father to me, and I was very fond of him. But suddenly, a nightmare unfolded. The next day, I was working at my desk in the office, preparing a report that had to be submitted by the end of the day. My phone rang, it was Tom. I answered in a quiet voice. "Emily." "Dad. Dad." Tom sounded frantic. He could barely get the words out. I stepped out of the office and into the break room. "Tom, what's wrong?" "Calm down." "What happened?" He spoke to me in a trembling voice. "Dad was in a car accident. He's in critical condition and unconscious." A moment of silence followed. My mind went blank. "Please, come to the hospital right away." "I'm heading there now." Tom gave me the name of the hospital and then quickly hung up. I rushed out of the office and jumped into a taxi. It can't be true that Dad is unconscious. I must have heard wrong. He's going to be fine. He has to be. In the taxi, I kept repeating those thoughts to myself, trying my best to calm down. I arrived at the hospital that Tom had mentioned. It was a large general hospital. I was directed to the emergency room. A police officer was standing at the entrance to the room. I gave a slight nod to the officer and entered the room. Inside were Tom and his mother. Tom's mother sat weakly in a chair, her eyes and nose red from crying. Tom's shoulders were slumped. I approached the bed where Tom's father lay. He was covered in bandages, with a large wound on his face. His body was hooked up to numerous tubes, and he appeared to be sleeping. I learned that Tom's father had gone out during work to mail a letter. While crossing the street at a green light, he was suddenly hit by a car that made a sharp turn. The car, after hitting him, continued to swerve before jumping the curb and crashing into a street tree. A high level of alcohol was detected from the driver. "Please wake up, Dad," I whispered, gently holding his hand. His hand was warm and strong. While Tom and his mother were called by the police to talk, I stayed by his side, holding his hand the entire time. I could feel his heartbeat. "He's alive. He just needs time to wake up. Dad, when you wake up, let's get you healthy again and go home together. Even if there are lasting effects, it's okay. I'll take care of you, just like you've always taken care of me." Now it's my turn. I didn't cry. There was no need, because I believed he would recover. He would get better and smile at me again with that kind smile. But he never woke up. A few days later, in the middle of the night, we received a call from the hospital. We rushed to be by his side. The hospital room was bustling with doctors and nurses. His condition had suddenly taken a turn for the worse. His steady heartbeat had become erratic. "Dad. Hang in there. Please." Both Tom and his mother desperately called out to him. A few minutes later, he passed away quietly, as if he had waited for us to arrive. His end was so sudden and unexpected. How could this have happened? Just the day before the accident. He had been smiling and chatting with me, just like always. He would always reprimanded Tom's mother whenever she said something harsh to me. He was full of life, and now he was gone. I held his hand all night, unwilling to let go. His hand was still warm, and I wanted to believe that he was still alive. But by the next morning, that warmth had faded. Dad, thank you. You always helped me, treating me with kindness like a real daughter. I wonder if my words reached him. A year has passed since then. After his funeral and burial, we slowly began to accept life without him. But our lives had changed drastically. Tom's mother was deeply heartbroken by the loss of her husband and started staying at home all the time. Worried about her, Tom began visiting her more frequently. It was only natural, after all, she had lost her beloved husband so suddenly. I supported Tom's decision to be there for her. Tom's mother had lost weight, and her energy had dwindled. Worried, I occasionally visited her too, to check on her. How can you not come around more often when I'm going through such a hard time? Don't you care about me? This is why I dislike people from single-parent families. You just don't understand other people's feelings. Her spiteful remarks never ceased. Was she coping with her grief by taking it out on me? Worse still, her bitterness began to change Tom. Hearing her daily complaints about me, Tom slowly adopted her prejudice, looking down on me as well. You're like this because you were raised by a single parent. That became his constant refrain. Over time, he stopped coming home entirely, and we effectively began living apart. Weeks passed. We only communicated by phone, and even then, Tom continued to belittle me. He also stopped contributing his salary to our household, leaving me to pay all the rent. I assumed he was spending his money on supporting his mother. I tried to convince myself that was the case. One day, Tom was informed of a transfer. His delivery company had opened a new branch in a different region, and Tom was chosen to manage it. The new branch was about a 3-hour drive from our city. So Tom decided to live there on his own. Tom's mother considered moving with him but ultimately chose to stay in the city, unwilling to leave the place full of memories of her late husband. And so, they were separated. A few weeks after Tom's transfer, an envelope arrived at our home. It was addressed to Tom. Since Tom hadn't changed his address after the move, all his mail was still being sent to our home. It was an unfamiliar-looking envelope, and I checked the sender. What? No way. I was shocked by what I saw. This is it. There's no point in us staying married any longer. Our marriage is already over. With that envelope in hand, I made up my mind. It's time to get a divorce. Just then, the doorbell rang, and a delivery driver arrived. I opened the door and was met with a surprising sight: several large cardboard boxes addressed to Tom. The sender was his mother. I signed for the packages and stood there, feeling overwhelmed. Where am I going to put all these boxes? I cleared some space in the room and stacked them in a corner. Since they were addressed to Tom, I couldn't open them. I wondered what was inside. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Tom. Did the packages arrive? His tone was softer than usual. They did, but what are we supposed to do with all this stuff? Ever since I transferred, Mom's been calling me every day, saying she's lonely. Not just at night, but she started calling during the day too. It's starting to wear me out. I thought, since he loves his mother so much, he could at least answer her calls. Then I came up with a brilliant idea. If she moves in with us, she won't feel lonely anymore. Tom seemed to misunderstand what living together meant. If he wanted to live with his mother so badly, he should have taken her with him to his new place. So, the rest of her stuff will arrive in a week. Please make sure to receive it. Mom will be moving in that day too, so take care of everything. Take care of everything? What does he mean by that? And if he's on his own, how does he plan to take care of his mother? Take care of everything? Are you coming back? He must have thought about what's next, right? No, it looks like I'll be here longer than expected. I won't be able to return for a while. So, for now, I need you to live with Mom. Then he hung up. This is a joke. He's belittled me, stopped contributing to the household. And now he's deciding, without even consulting me, that his mother will move in? My anger was boiling over, and I couldn't stop trembling. It's time to end this life. A week later, Tom called again. Did the packages arrive? Mom should be heading over there this evening, so make sure you're ready. She's probably tired, so help her unpack. I couldn't stand hearing him go on about his mother. You grew up in a single-parent household, so you're not very considerate. But I'm counting on you to take care of Mom. I took a deep breath to calm myself before responding. The packages arrived this morning. And I just moved out of the apartment myself. It's such a coincidence that everything happened at the same time. There was a moment of silence. If you want to keep living in that apartment so badly, you'll have to renew the lease and pay the rent yourself. What? What are you talking about? If I stay involved with this family any longer, I'm going to break. I'm done being manipulated by him. A week ago, I decided to leave that apartment and put an end to our marriage. Don't you get it? I've already moved out and gone back to my parents' house. I took all my things with me. The only things left in that apartment are your mom's boxes. The rest is up to you. By the way, I left the divorce papers on the doorstep. So sign them and submit them to the city office. My mother, who was helping me unpack, overheard the conversation as I had the phone on speaker. She quietly listened to Tom's voice echoing through the room. What nonsense are you spouting? Are you at your parents' house? Mom's going to the apartment this evening. Go back there right now. You can't just leave her alone. Don't you feel sorry for her? Tom's voice grew louder with anger. I'm sick of your mom obsession. If you love her so much, then take care of her yourself. I have a mother too, and I've decided to prioritize her, just like you do with yours. I didn't care what he said anymore. I was going to live my life on my terms. You married into this family. You're using our last name. Don't you understand the responsibility that comes with that? Being a wife means becoming part of our family and treating Mom as your own. I could almost picture Tom's face turning red with rage on the other end of the line. His selfish words pushed me to my breaking point. Then, my mother spoke calmly. Tom, what are you confused about? Just because she took your last name when you got married doesn't mean anything. We're still blood related, a family connected on a much deeper level. That's something that will never change. And since you're getting divorced, the last name will change anyway. And being a wife or a mother-in-law won't matter anymore, right? My mother chuckled sarcastically. Tom seemed to be at a loss for words. Then she pressed the red button on the phone, ending the call. It was over. All that was left was to wait for the divorce papers to be filed. I looked at my mother with a sense of relief. Thank you, Mom. She smiled back at me. That evening, after we had finished dinner and were cleaning up, the doorbell rang suddenly. A sense of dread washed over me. Who is it? I asked through the intercom. Please, open the door. I'm begging you. The voice on the other side was Tom's, as he pounded on the door. Fearing the noise would disturb the neighbors, I reluctantly opened it. Please. Come back. I'm begging you. I'm sorry for everything. Tom rushed towards me. You're not serious about the divorce, are you? I can't do this without you. It was too late for him to change his attitude. My mind was made up. I'm serious. I told you, I'm done with being married to a mama's boy. I've already moved out, so you need to deal with those boxes by the end of the month. They're still sealed, so you can just send them back. Tom suddenly broke down in tears, collapsing to his knees and bowing his head. Please. Mom has already given up the apartment she was living in. And now she has nowhere to go. Can't you reconsider? Emily, please. Let's live together. I'm sorry for the way I've treated you. We can't manage without you. Even his mother was trying to appeal to my sympathy now. This must have been a plan they concocted together to manipulate me. What a ridiculous charade, what a waste of time. I already told you. If you want to live in that apartment, then renew the lease under your own name. Why are you trying to make this my problem? Or is there some reason you can't rent the apartment yourself? Tom remained frozen, his head bowed. And no, it's not that. Sweat dripped from Tom's forehead. Just as I suspected. Then what's this? Is this why you're struggling financially? I showed Tom a photo on my phone. It was of the letter that had led me to decide on divorce. I had taken a picture of the letter beforehand and saved it on my phone. Can you still say there's nothing wrong? The letter was from a consumer finance company, and beneath the recipient's name. It was marked in red as a final notice. I haven't opened it, but I'm guessing you've racked up quite a bit of debt. You haven't contributed a single penny to our household. So what have you been doing with your salary to end up in this mess? I delivered the final blow to Tom. The real reason he wanted to reconcile was simple: he needed my income. The thought was so ridiculous, I couldn't help but laugh. Well, you see. There was a brief silence. I made some bad investments. A friend told me about a great opportunity, and I trusted him. I poured my salary into it every month, and even took out loans. I didn't want to be outdone by you, Emily, working at a securities firm. I wanted to prove I knew about investments too, and that I could make a lot of money. I wanted to show you up. Show me up? When had I ever looked down on him? Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, his mother said, "It's my fault." I told him that Emily, being an elite salesperson at a securities firm, must be looking down on us. But it wasn't a great opportunity at all. It was a scam. I lost everything, and the debt just kept piling up. Desperate to pay it off, I borrowed more, hoping for a big win, but it all ended in failure. Unbeknownst to me, Tom had been sinking into a gambling spiral. And the debt had grown exponentially with interest. Please, help me. I can't make it without you, Emily. I'll do my best to pay off the debt, but could you at least help with living expenses? Tom's face had turned pale. You've done whatever you wanted, looked down on me. And now that you're in financial trouble, you suddenly change your tune. I'm sorry, but your debt has nothing to do with me. I have nothing more to say to either of you. From now on, we'll communicate through a lawyer. Please leave. Neither of them wanted to back down. Please. I'm begging you. Tom remained rooted to the spot, refusing to move. If you intend to stay here any longer, I'll call the police. With slumped shoulders, they finally turned and left. I watched through a crack in the curtains as they walked away. Tom kept stopping and looking back, as if expecting me to follow him. That was the last I saw of Tom and his mother. Some time later, our divorce was finalized. I heard through the lawyer that Tom had resisted the divorce for quite a while. Was I really such a convenient wife for him? Apparently, his mother had finally persuaded him by saying, "Forget about that worthless girl from a single-parent family and find someone new." And so Tom reluctantly gave up. Tom then set out to find a new wife. But with his overwhelming debt, shabby appearance, unkempt beard, and general air of neglect, no woman was interested in him. Even when he managed to secure a date, the requirement of living with his mother quickly put an end to any potential relationship. His hopes of remarriage faded into a distant dream. Tom and his mother ended up living together in an old, small apartment in the slums. His debt continued to grow, and it became impossible to repay with his monthly salary alone. Eventually, legal action was taken by his creditors. Tom's workplace began receiving frequent calls from creditors, and eventually, his wages were garnished. Unable to bear the shame and cold stares from his colleagues, Tom quit his job in desperation. Of course, he couldn't escape his debts. He worked tirelessly, taking on multiple jobs, delivering newspapers in the early morning, working on construction sites during the day, and directing traffic at night, but the debt never shrank. Tom's income was entirely consumed by debt repayments, leaving his mother to scrape by with the income she earned as a janitor. I never thought I'd still be working at this age. How did we end up living like this? Tom's mother often lamented their harsh circumstances, taking out her frustration on him. "It's all your fault we ended up like this." But it wasn't solely Tom's fault. His mother had brainwashed him with daily complaints about me, leading him down this path. No matter how much she blamed him, their situation wasn't going to improve. Eventually, they fell behind on their rent and were evicted from their apartment. From then on, they disappeared into the shadows, slipping into a life of obscurity. No one knew what became of them. Meanwhile, I enjoyed life at home with my mother. The bond we shared wasn't just superficial, but something much deeper. I was so happy when my mother had said that to Tom. "Mom, I got my bonus." They recognized my achievements, and it's the biggest one I've ever received. "Let's go on a trip to celebrate during my next vacation." From when I was a child until now, my mother had always protected me. Now it was my turn to repay her. I decided I would support her not just as a daughter but as an independent woman. "How about this beach? This food looks delicious." We planned our trip together, flipping through brochures. And there was one more parent I couldn't forget, Tom's father, who had always taken care of me. Knowing what became of Tom and his mother must have pained him deeply. Every year on his death anniversary, I visit his grave with his favorite beer. The grave is overgrown with weeds, clearly neglected. His wife probably had no time to care for it, given her struggles. I make sure to clean up around the grave. It's the only way I can show my gratitude to him now. "Thank you, Dad." Under the clear blue sky, I put my hands together in front of his grave. My son finally got the wife we'd been waiting for. She is pregnant. My son is getting married, and I'll even get to see my grandchild's face. My husband brought out a special bottle of wine, and the three of us toasted together. Yet, despite all the excitement, my daughter-in-law dropped a shocking statement on me. A dirty old cleaning lady like you is a bad influence on my child. So consider us estranged. It's been a year since the estrangement began. My son says he's coming over with his family. It seems he has made a decision. I am Hilary Gale, 72 years old. Until 2 years ago, I was a leading architect. But I retired at 70 and now enjoy a comfortable retirement in a high-rise condo in New York City's Midtown with my husband of the same age. My husband was a skilled carpenter and retired at 65. To support me while I was still working, he went to culinary school and learned to cook. Now, he's even better at cooking than I am. He spends his free time building plastic models and walking for his health. As for me, I thought I would relax after retirement. But due to my inherent restlessness, I couldn't sit still at home and signed up as a temporary cleaning staff a year ago. Cleaning buildings in New York City. Sometimes I clean buildings I once designed. And I feel a nostalgic attachment to them like they're my own children. I enjoy this job because it keeps me active for my health. At work, I keep it a secret that I was a first-class architect with an annual income of $500,000 and now live in a high-rise condo. Envy from others can be quite troublesome. It's easier to be seen as an elderly lady who still needs to work after turning 70. My only real worry is my 40-year-old son. He works for a sporting goods manufacturer in New York. He's been playing baseball since elementary school and played shortstop in the Big Six university baseball leagues. He still enjoys watching baseball and likes sports in general, which suits his job in sales at the sporting goods company. My son is single. He was supposed to get married 5 years ago, but his fiancée betrayed him in a terrible way. To put it simply, she was after his money. According to my son, her attitude changed after she learned we lived in a high-rise condo. She started spending more money, inquiring about mine and my husband's health. And, worst of all, he once overheard her talking with another man she didn't know, saying, "His parents are quite old, and once we get the inheritance, we can live a rich life." The breakup was quite a scene, but somehow he managed to cut ties with her. I can't marry someone who's just waiting for my parents to die, he said with a wry smile, though I could tell the ordeal had taken a toll on him. Afterward, he moved out of our high-rise condo and started living alone in a one-room condo. It was tough for my husband and me to see how the high-rise condo had become a trauma for our son. 5 years passed without any talk of marriage or him dating someone. While marriage isn't everything, and happiness is what really matters, I still hoped he would find a life partner to spend his life with. We bought the high-rise condo about 10 years ago. Before that, we lived in a detached house in the neighboring state, left to us by my husband's parents. It was comfortable, but as we got older, it became harder to go up and down the stairs. One day, my husband suddenly said, "Hey, why don't we sell this house and spend our old age in the city? I've been hearing about these high-rise condos recently. They seem convenient and secure." Though I had never designed a high-rise condo, I was very interested. Living in central New York would allow us to easily visit cinemas and museums, and it seemed like we wouldn't get bored even after retiring. If we retire from work and just sit at home, we might get senile, my husband said, and I agreed with a laugh. So, we sold our longtime home and moved into a high-rise condo in New York City's Midtown. Living there turned out to be very comfortable, with a variety of commercial facilities and clinics on the lower floors, making it so that we almost never had to go outside for anything. We chose carefully, so the property value is unlikely to decrease significantly. We also considered eventually selling it and moving into a nursing home together. My son comes to visit once a month, joining us for dinner. One day, he arrived and announced, Mom, Dad, my girlfriend is pregnant. So we're getting married. My husband and I were initially surprised, but then delighted. What a joyous occasion, my son getting married and even getting to see my grandchild. My husband brought out a special bottle of wine, and the three of us toasted together. His partner, Mandy, a 35-year-old woman, happened to sit next to him at a baseball game. They supported the same team. And after a thrilling seesaw game where their team won with a walk-off in the final inning, they decided to celebrate together. It's nice to have a common hobby to enjoy together, I thought as I imagined my son wearing a baseball cap, attending games with his child and forming a happy family trio. Then, my son said, So, I have a favor to ask. Can we keep it a secret that you guys live in a high-rise condo for a while? It's not that I don't trust her, but it seemed like his previous experience had left quite a trauma. Understood. It's not like we have to keep it a secret forever, right? Yeah, thanks. I think we can bring her here once the baby is born. I was truly looking forward to it. After consulting each other, my son and his wife decided that given their age, they would skip a traditional wedding ceremony and opt for a photo wedding, and hold a wedding reception party instead. They told me not to bother with a formal meeting between the families, and that greetings at the party would suffice. Apparently, many couples nowadays opt for a more casual approach to marriage. Well, indeed, if spending money on a wedding ceremony and reception means less financial stability when a child is born, it seems like a sensible approach. At the wedding reception, my son's bride, Cindy, turned out to be a rather strong-willed and outspoken woman. My son is gentle and somewhat timid, so it's good that Cindy is the more assertive one. Cindy's parents are both under 60 and still working. What caught my attention was when Cindy asked, So, your father is retired, but does your mother still work? And I replied, My husband is retired, but I work part-time cleaning buildings. The look on Cindy's face when she said, A cleaning lady, was as if she was looking down on cleaning staff. My son and Cindy have started living together in a 2-room condo in Narima, close to Cindy's parents' house. She's pregnant, and it's safer to be near her family. My commute has become a bit harder, but, my son said, already under his wife's thumb. Being henpecked by your wife makes for a peaceful home, my husband remarked. Oh. When did I ever henpeck you? No, that's just how you are, darling. We were laughing, but it was no longer a laughing matter. When I noticed my son looking terribly gaunt during his rare visit to our high-rise condo. He says the morning sickness is tough and he spends almost all day lying down. I do all the housework, well, that's okay. He said this with a wry smile. It's a part of marriage to help each other out during tough times. There will be such periods. But, morning sickness at 7 months? You should be in your stable period by now, and it usually subsides. But she says she feels lethargic and looks really unwell. People vary, but lying around too much can actually make labor more difficult. Maybe you should consult a doctor. I blurted this out because I genuinely hoped for the grandchild's safe arrival. Later, when I tried contacting my son, it seemed he hadn't taken my advice. She might be hospitalized for preeclampsia, he said. Worried, I rushed to the apartment where my son and his wife were living. Mandy had gained a significant amount of weight, probably over 45 pounds. Mandy, you've gained too much weight. Preeclampsia is dangerous. Even now, you should change your lifestyle. Be mindful of your daily diet and do some light exercise. I said this out of concern, but it seemed to have touched a nerve. What are you talking about? I need to eat for the baby. And it's natural to gain some weight. The idea that a pregnant woman needs to eat for two is outdated. Nowadays, it's common sense to eat a balanced diet and try not to gain too much weight. Caught between not knowing whose side to take, my son was flustered. Mandy, you'll be 36 by your due date, right? That's considered advanced maternal age. You need to be extra careful compared to younger expectant mothers. Maybe that was too much to say. Why do you only say things that make me anxious? Just go home, she yelled. And I was thrown out. As my son escorted me out of the apartment, I apologized. I might have said too much, but I'm really worried. To which he responded, I understand. I'll talk to her, so don't worry. Though he said that, a few weeks later, Mandy was hospitalized for preeclampsia. I thought about visiting, but my son stopped me. The hospital food is terrible, and it's making her irritable, he said. Which is expected given the low salt content. All this was the result of her eating whatever she wanted and not being active. I could only pray that I'd be able to meet my grandchild safely. Perhaps my prayers were answered. Because Mandy was discharged after about 10 days. And eventually gave birth to a healthy baby boy. My husband and I held hands and rejoiced upon hearing the news from our son. We rushed to the hospital, thanked Mandy for letting us meet our grandson. And praised her efforts, but she retorted, I didn't have him for you. It's said that mother-in-laws and daughters-in-law often don't get along. And I had thought I wouldn't be like that. But to her, I must have seemed like a nagging mother-in-law. I was quite disappointed and disheartened. Nevertheless, when I heard from my son that Mandy and the baby were discharged together, my husband and I brought gifts and visited their apartment. The newborn was so tiny and adorable, it reminded me of when my son was born. And I couldn't help but tear up. As I gently reached out to touch my grandson's hand. Don't touch him with your dirty hands. Mandy snapped. I had washed my hands meticulously at their place, yet she scolded me. Hey! That's no way to speak, my son interjected. Whose side are you on? She retorted. It's not about sides. Your father, your mother, Mandy, and the child were all precious family members. Huh? What are you talking about? A husband and child should naturally be the most important. Their argument escalated into a full-blown quarrel. Come on, both of you, calm down. As I tried to intervene, Mandy snapped. Shut up. Who do you think is at fault here? It was harsh to hear such words from someone who is technically a parent-in-law. And then she shouted hysterically. A dirty old cleaning lady like you is a bad influence on my grandchild, so we're estranged. Stunned by her outburst, my husband sighed. Indeed, showing this kind of scene to the grandchild is harmful. Yes. Mandy, is that all you wanted to say? She didn't reply. I felt very sad. My husband and I, shoulders drooped, left our son and daughter-in-law's apartment. After consulting with my husband, we decided to keep our distance from them for a while. Maybe after some time passes, things might change. Holding on to that slim hope, I looked forward to the photos of my grandson that my son sent via line. Recently, he began to pull himself up to stand, unbearably cute. The more adorable the pictures of my grandson were, the more I longed to hold him. Which was difficult. One thing I noticed was that the photos always showed my grandson alone. Normally, wouldn't they take pictures holding the child? I worried with my husband that their marital relationship might not be going well. As the year since my grandson's birth was about to pass, my son contacted me. He said that the three of them would visit us next Sunday. Did you talk to Mandy about the high-rise condo? If not, they wouldn't be coming here. Yes. I told her about the high-rise condo. And that you used to be a first-class architect with a significant income. But she didn't believe it, so I decided to bring her here. It seemed that their marital relationship was fine, and Mandy's attitude had softened, making it possible for them to get along well with us, the grandparents. He had his reasons, I suppose. Though I had questions, I decided to wait for the day to come. Wow. No way. It's really true? As she entered the door and stepped into the foyer, Mandy exclaimed with joy. She had gained even more weight since the last time I saw her. No way. This is amazing. How many rooms are there? The view is incredible too. It's on the 30th floor, right? Beautiful. Without greeting my husband and me, Mandy entered the room and started checking around. My husband and I were so absorbed in taking turns holding our long-awaited grandchild, who was sleeping soundly, that just looking at him made our cheeks relax. What? The baby woke up and started crying. Maybe he was surprised by the unfamiliar surroundings, or perhaps he was hungry. Mandy, the baby is crying. Could it be time for his milk? However, it seemed like Mandy wasn't even listening to the baby's cries. There, don't cry, don't cry. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Mandy said to our son in a tone of voice we'd never heard before, showing unexpected dependency. Hillary, you lied about being just a cleaner, but you actually made a lot of money, right? I don't quite understand, but you were a first-class architect? She approached me with a coquettish behavior. It's true that I worked as a cleaner. Wow, that's unusual. If I had money and lived in a place like this, I'd enjoy life elegantly every day. She was practically declaring herself a lazy idler. Then Mandy, getting carried away, blurted out something fatal. Once your father-in-law and mother-in-law die, this high-rise condo becomes ours, right? No, it won't. What? My son replied coldly, leaving Mandy astonished. I'm divorcing you. I'm taking custody of our child. What are you saying all of a sudden? Stop it with the bad jokes. It's no joke. I've tolerated you skipping out on household duties and parenting. Well, I gave you a child even though you're over 40 and unimpressive. You should be grateful. Her reasoning was absurd, especially since she wasn't young herself. But I can't live with someone who looks forward to my parents' death. I never said that. Do you know why I've kept silent about the high-rise condo and Mom's job? What? And why I brought you here today? Our son looked pained as he spoke. What are you talking about? This child is mine. You can't just divorce and hand over custody. Okay, I understand. I'll pay child support, so please let's get divorced. Are you telling me to become a single mother and live in an apartment? That's ridiculous. We don't need to divorce. We can all live in this high-rise condo together. Through this exchange, it was clear she was more interested in the condo than in custody rights. Perhaps our son brought Mandy here to give her one last chance. For the sake of their child, hoping they could resolve things without divorce. If only Mandy had shown more consideration towards us, his parents. our son might not have considered divorce. However, once words are spoken, they can't be taken back. Once he made up his mind, our son refused to accept her tearful pleas. Still, as Mandy continued to protest, our son said, "I've recorded you not doing housework or parenting on video. And I've also recorded what you've said since we arrived here." "What? What is that?" "You're a liar and a coward." "The worst." Mandy turned pale. "If that's the case, let's discuss this through lawyers." "But Mandy, I haven't forgotten that you told me not to touch my grandson with my dirty hands and declared us estranged." "That's right. You were the one who wanted estrangement. And now you can't just say you want to live together." As my husband and I said this, Mandy had nothing to reply and collapsed to her knees, muttering complaints as she staggered out of the room. Thus, my husband and I came to live in the high-rise condo with our son and grandson. Our son was feeling down for a while, lamenting, "Why can't I see through women? It's all because I wanted to live in a high-rise condo." "I'm sorry." My husband felt responsible, though it wasn't his fault. "Well, it's just bad luck that it happened twice in a row. You'll surely meet someone nice eventually." Even though I said that, our son replied with a sad smile, "No, it's okay. I have my son, and both my parents are healthy. I'm already very happy." Mandy, having divorced and returned to her parents' house, often left her nursing child with her daughter to go out, to her parents' dismay. When they discovered she was also in debt and not working, they scolded her, saying they wouldn't keep her at home if she didn't work. Ironically, she ended up working as a cleaner, the very job she had scorned, being treated as an incompetent old lady. That's what happens when you look down on people like that. You're bound to be disliked at work. Occasionally, messages arrive from her to our son, wanting to reconcile. But now he doesn't even read them, let alone reply. While my husband and I were overjoyed to live with our grandson, taking care of an infant at over 70 was more challenging than imagined. Grandchildren are adorable when you see them for just a few hours. But we had forgotten how hard parenting was. After our daughter-in-law essentially abandoned her family duties, our son, who had been managing work and parenting alone for a year, truly seemed admirable. "Mom, Dad, aren't you tired? Why don't you hire a babysitter?" Our son suggested this, and we decided to hire a babysitter. A 36-year-old single mother named Cindy, who was very efficient as she was raising her own children, came to help us from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on weekdays. She's a mother of a 10-year-old girl and a 7-year-old boy. Being here from 10 to 16 really helps. I can go to work after sending the kids to school, do the shopping, and prepare dinner in time, she said gratefully. Living together as a family of 3, they've grown quite close over time. Cindy once shared that her husband was addicted to gambling and showed no signs of changing, so she slapped him with divorce papers. She hasn't received any child support. She's a bright and resilient woman. My husband and I have grown fond of Cindy and invited her and her children over for a meal at our home on her day off, Sunday. Cindy happily accepted the invitation. "Really?" When I told the kids I work in a high-rise condo, they were so envious. They've been dying to visit. Cindy's children are polite, energetic, and adorable. They quickly became friends with our nearly 2-year-old grandson. This high-rise condo is amazing. The cars look so tiny from up here. It was delightful to watch the kids running around, enjoying themselves. The younger boy was particularly fascinated by my husband's model kits. And my husband proudly showed off his collection of robots and fighter jets. This was the first time Cindy and our son met since she has weekends off. They greeted each other with, "Nice to meet you," and my son said, "Thank you for always looking after my son and my parents." Cindy replied, "I'm the one who should be thankful," and they both laughed, saying, "It feels a bit strange, doesn't it?" Actually, my husband and I had hoped to set them up. She'd make a great daughter-in-law, we thought. But we didn't want to push, so after introducing them, we left it up to them. We had already informed Cindy about our situation. That she would be caring for our grandson whose mother was not involved. "I can't believe there's a mother who wouldn't want to take care of such a cute child," she had said, astonished. At the living room table, my son and Cindy sat watching the kids play. "It's nice, the sound of children laughing," my son remarked thoughtfully. "Yes, it's wonderful. And it's so lovely to see both your parents cooking together in the kitchen." They could hear their conversation from the open kitchen. My dad learned to cook at a culinary school after he retired, to help out my mom who was still working. My husband blushed as he shared this. "I wish I had that kind of relationship. My marriage didn't work out." "Me too," my son replied. "Isn't this nice?" I signaled to my husband with my eyes. He nodded back. Cindy, would you like to live in a high-rise condo?" My son suddenly broached a crucial topic. My husband and I tensed up. "Well, I think this place is wonderful. But for me, it's more important who I live with than where I live." Cindy probably gave the perfect answer. I was sure that was the moment my son fell for her. They started visiting us on weekends as a family, and our grandson joined them on outings. They looked like a long-married, happy family. Perhaps the intelligent Cindy, knowing about my son's past traumas, skillfully navigated his emotional scars and captured his heart. If so, that was fine by me. I believed she would continue to be clever and build a happy home without ever slipping up. After a year of close family ties, my son formally told us, "I'm thinking of proposing to Cindy. Do Mom and Dad approve?" My husband and I looked at each other and nodded. "It's about time, huh?" "Yeah, I was wondering when you'd ask." "Of course, we approve." "Yes, of course," we said in unison.